Hello and welcome to this edition of our video series at the Flashpoint Now, where we speak with technology leaders to unravel some bits of how enterprise technology behind the scenes is working, evolving, prepping for the future, what the leaders are bullish about, and perhaps also learn a little bit about what keeps them up at night. For today's discussion, I am joined by Kailash Maisekar, who is the head and a board member at the India GCC of IDox, a specialist software company focusing on the government sector. They provide document management tools specialized for different verticals, and they also provide technology for elections. This has the ingredients for an interesting discussion. Welcome to the video podcast, Kailash, and thank you for making the time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me on this podcast. Thanks to you and your team. Hopefully, this will be a learning experience for me as well.
Before we start, a quick note to our viewers. The names you're seeing on screen is not any copy-paste error. Kailash and I do share the same first name with just one letter difference. So with that, first question to you, Kailash. Can you tell us what is different in building a GCC for a government sector focused software company such as yours? A company that also has highly industry specific solutions as compared to engineering centers of, let's say, businesses that face a wider market or a consumer market.
Yeah. So let me start off with giving you a little bit background about what IDox is, who IDox is, and what do we do, and then get into the specifics of your question. So IDox as a company, we are, as we speak, we are a London Stock Exchange listed company, a public company, and we operate worldwide. And we serve globally, governments, whether it is federal government, state government, local government, and also public sector, enterprises by providing them specialist technology, and not just software, but technology for things like, planning, building control, environmental health, maybe health, geospatial, engineering, information management. And so there's multiple domains, that we work in, and some of these domains are actually highly complex. And the beauty of working with governments and public sector is these are some long-term contracts that you work for 5 years, 10 years, and therefore it actually provides us an opportunity to get into the customer's mind and their customer's mind and start innovating more about how can we do better in our products, in our services, in our technology. Now, how different is IDox as a GCC from others? No, I think structurally we are probably the same. Perhaps every GCC has a similar structure of delivering services to its parent company and the subsidiaries. I think structurally we are the same. I think technologically probably we are pretty much the same. As other GCCs, we are using exactly the same technologies as others. There may be specific ones which are different, but I think, from a domain standpoint, I think we differentiate a little bit. Now, you may have seen GCCs which are heavily finance focused. They are probably just BFSI sector, fintech, GCCs. You probably saw, health tech, who are predominantly in health tech. They are probably, have seen GCCs who are in reg tech, which is like, the GRC solutions part. But the beauty of working with IDox is you actually get to work on various domains. So we've got a product called Lily, which caters to health tech. We have a cloud platform which is called IDox Cloud, just like any other cloud service providers or cloud tech providers. We have a fintech and reg tech platform called Pliance. We have other technologies, some things like EIM, building controls management, which are more in the compliance and regulatory stuff. We have civic tech, and community tech like grant finder, local governments, elections. Then, we've got IoT, which is transportation technology, we also use, AI. We also have geospatial technology like MapShop, Land Mapper are some of our, products. Similarly, we are into property technology. We are into asset management technology. Products like Fusion Live, we have in our portfolio, So basically, what I'm trying to say is, working for IDox, which is in government and public sector technology, actually gives you an opportunity to work on, for various domains. not just one domain, so, and therefore in that way, I think it's more challenging to work in an environment like IDox. It's more cutting edge, it's more demanding, and it requires diverse, skills from that point of view, not just technical skills, but also domain related skills. And that's how we are different. But otherwise, on all other matters, we are pretty much the same like every other GCC.
Kailash, does having both horizontal and vertical focus make it any different for you to be an innovation center, be a center of excellence as it is called? Earlier GCCs or ODCs as they were called would have teams called centers of excellence. Now there is conversation on the entire center being a center of excellence. To moving beyond cost arbitrage. In cases like yours, where there is where you're spread horizontally, but each vertical is still a specialty, is a focus. How do you manage innovation or being a center of excellence in this environment?
So, like I said, we work on various domains. Not just a single domain. And we know there is a lot of talk about, GCCs moving from being cost centers to innovation centers, But I think, the opportunity to become a center of excellence or become an innovation center is available to all GCCs. Not just, unique or, domain specific or tech specific, that every GCC has that opportunity to become one. So long as, they are moving upwards their, value chain, in terms of maturity. Now, from my experience, sometimes, you hear about stories that, hey, you move away from cost center to an innovation center or to a value center or a center of excellence. And if you're not going there, it means you're not growing. I think that's not an argument, that we should, get into, because each one of us have a different mandate. Each one of us have a different requirement and a purpose and objective with which we have set up, right? So I think it's not bad, being a cost center. It's not bad being, a center where you are focused on productivity gains and cost, and it's not bad being being not innovating as well, because the purpose is probably different, right? And I see that all these models coexist together. Even though we call ourselves that we are a center of excellence, we may not be a center of excellence in every single domain or every single function that we have within the GCC, right? There could be functions, for example, the shared service function, within the GCC, which does the finance shared service, HR shared service, the procurement, the PMO, the customer success. They are usual business. They are keeping the business up and running. And therefore, the operating model for those kind of functions within the GCC will remain probably the same, or maybe evolve more towards, gains in productivity. But other functions, for example, the engineering functions, the R&D function, the AI function, and those are the areas where we continuously keep evolving, and we will start doing more with less and start looking at how we can spot opportunities. Now that's where the mandate stops, right? You are going beyond your mandate to actually deliver more. Now, there are two types of GCCs typically, we have in India. One is, which is, 100% export oriented unit like us, where our customers are internal customers, where the headquarter and the subsidiary companies of our group. And there are others, where they are also, selling products in India, right? So the GCCs which have a mandate to sell products in India, there's no option but for them to innovate. Because if they have innovated a product in Europe, and if they try to sell the same product in India as it is, it may or may not work. So they have to sit down, the GCCs have to go beyond the mandate of the HQ and start looking at what the local market needs, and then start innovating, products which are required for the Indian subcontinent. Now, the beauty is that, a lot of these GCCs have evolved from not just developing products for India and the Indian subcontinent, but they're now actually developing products for the world, which wasn't part of their mandate before. So now, for example, Suzuki is now looking at products which are developed in India and exporting in Japan, which wasn't the case before. Imagine, we exporting to cars to Japan, which were designed in India and made for India, right? Which was an impossible thing, to think about in the last, 10, 15 years. So I think, every GCC goes through that journey. And I think, if you look at the journey from my experience, there are four types of, journey, every GCC goes through. One is a transactional journey where you set up your GCC only to do transactional activities. Then you graduate there from being a transaction to more tactical, journey where you start doing more of tactical work, for example, focusing on development, engineering, customer success, product management, product development, project management, things like that. You start doing more tactical and technical work. A third, is once you mature in that area, you move on to the transformational, journey, where you start focusing on all transformational project that group wide, where you're probably working on a product, maybe a new future, maybe you are digitizing, some parts of the organization, or maybe you built a disaster recovery center. Maybe you are looking at, becoming a backbone of your data centers, which are, globally, spread across, and you're providing, support to the global organization in a transformational way. And lastly, you become a strategic, part of the organization, where I call them as a strategic, journey that you go through, where you are now creating, R&D roadmap, your, mergers and acquisitions. You are participating in the ecosystem, local ecosystem, or the global ecosystem in terms, for example, co-creating with startups, building with other companies, joint ventures, launching new products, out of the GCC, essentially shaping the future of the company and drive strategic outcomes, not just for the GCC or one or two subsidiaries, but looking at holistically, globally, and creating impact to the global customers. I think, when you see those signs when a GCC is going through all of these four phases, you can definitely say that, look, this GCC has gone through this journey and now they are an innovation center or a center of excellence.
It's a beautiful poetry there, from cost center to innovation center to revenue center as well. And you also gave us a very quotable quote in your response. It's not necessarily wrong to be a cost center. The two can coexist. Thank you for that insight. And now we have gone 2-3 questions, I think, without bringing up AI, right? So it's high time. It's the flavor of the season of the last couple of years. Here's what I want to learn from you. IDox operates in sectors where accuracy, compliance, auditability are critical. This is not to take anything away from other sectors, obviously, but I don't think anyone will have misgivings if you say in some sectors, it's a lot more critical, a few extra nines after the decimal point. How do you approach AI adoption? Particularly when you're working with the government sector, do you keep additional checks and balances? What's your take? How are you approaching it?
Look, at IDox, we treat, AI as an enabler, right? It's another technology which can hyperscale our growth. It can fast track, some of our product development activities. It can bring a lot more transparency to our governance, capabilities. And it's an unconstrained, layer that can give you amazing productivity, right? So our approach, is twofold. The way we look at it, right? We don't look at it, from a narrow, space of looking at AI from just, couple of use cases, where we can deploy. In practice, what that means for us is we are starting with how AI can add value with the existing products, with these existing workflows, while designing our products to become more auditable, more compliance ready, and also provide more human oversight from the day one, and we're not looking at, we've created something and then we go back and see, hey, did anyone check this? Did we have a human actually take a look at this? Has anyone audited this? So we have embedded these things right from the day one. So the way we approach this is twofold. One is from a control standpoint, and second is how do we operate, from a model standpoint, right? So if I look at the controls, right? If I give some examples, for sectors, where we work heavily, for example, like planning, public protection, legal, there are some key controls needed. For example, we need heavy data governance. We need access controls. We need a lot of traceability. And that includes, policy-based redactions, and then secure document handling, because, building control where, a supervisor is providing approvals to, land, property, and all of that requires a secure documentation control, right? Because they are essentially approving the documents that you have uploaded, as a contractor, as a builder, as a landowner, or maybe as a property owner, right? So therefore, there is a role-based access, right? And the ability to reproduce how a model, can be reached, or where it has reached and how it has reached in the later part of the audit, which is very, very important. And finally, any use case, we have, must or cannot be explained. If a use case cannot be explained or evidenced well enough for an audit, it should stay away. We just don't include them as a pilot, or maybe rescope or descope, in many cases. So that's how we look at, use cases from a pilot standpoint, from a control standpoint. And the second is the operating model standpoint. Look pragmatically, when you set up, any use case, we have an AI committee, and the primary role of the AI committee is to provide governance. And governance not in terms of just the use cases, a broad-based, governance, which basically defines the risks, that the AI, the technology brings, the opportunity that the technology brings, and the outcomes that it can drive, to the wider organization, while staying within the limits of the governance and the compliance and the regulations, such as the GDPR, the high trust, and some of these regulations that we have, which basically mirrors the approach of what we have described publicly. Very focused. We are very focused on in our approach in a productized manner. We use real world AI use cases which our customers want to use, and not just glossy experiments where somebody wants to prove a point that we have these AI capabilities. That's not, and therefore we invest heavily in our in-house capabilities, expertise, where technology can be safely embedded in our core offerings to our customers, right? And we don't try to look at high risk workflows which require heavy model cards, or maybe approval, approvals across wider stakeholders within the not just within the company but also outside the company. So we look at workflows which are real world, which create real impact to our customers. So in a nutshell, if I want to give you what are the three things that we look at, is one is we look at how do we automate the repetitive parts, and not the accountable parts, because we want to keep the accountability with the human and repeatability with the AI, right? That's what we look at, when we look at a use case, right? We look at, how AI can help us summarize, classify, retrieve, recommend, the data that we have, but keep the final decision with the regulated context with humans, right? Where, there is explainability, there is auditability, and there is a context involved from a real world standpoint. And the last one is all of this actually gives us a very clear path and a scalable method for AI to be auditable. There is a trust that built in, there's a compliance that is built in, and there are evidentiary standards that are built in, which are evolving. To be honest, these standards are evolving as we implement AI as an industry, and we are learning from each other to build these standards.
So that is human in the loop, auditability, compliance, internal and evolving compliance standards, and perhaps most important, no hallucinations, right?
Absolutely.
On a different tangent, towards the latter part of this discussion, that was a good deep dive into AI, but now coming to the human side of things, how do you attract top engineering talent to a GCC such as yours, which requires domain heavy expertise across multiple domains. So, how are you playing in the talent war?
Look, the domain heavy, sometimes, people think that is a constraint, but we actually look at it as our moat. We see it as our moat. Because when you compare the domain heavy with the modern technology and the clear impact that we create on the society, with our solutions, like I talked about elections, community solutions, the asset solutions, geospatial solutions, and when you couple that with a startup like mindset, where you're working on a product and you are trying to create a product out of a small use case, right? When you couple all of these together, right, it actually and top of all of this, a stable organization. Why I say that stable? Because typically our contracts are 5 year, 10 years long. So therefore the impact of the ups and downs in the market and the geopolitical situations actually shield us from being more stable organization, right? When you put all of these together in context, right, it actually, the domain heavy actually becomes our moat. And now it gives us an opportunity to position this moat with the engineering talent, because look, there is a war for the talent. And we realized that, when we came to India through 2 acquisitions and converted that into a GCC, we realized very early on that, look, it's not the top salaries that is going to attract the talent, right? It's not going to, just the top salaries and fancy designations. That's not going to win the top talent. It's the quality of work. It's the niche. It's the cutting edge work. It's the challenging work that is going to challenge the very creativity of the talent. It's going to challenge the skills to how you can think out of the box. Now, sometimes, we encourage people to not think out of the box. And I'm probably saying something on your podcast probably for the first time, and it may raise some eyebrows. And I say, create your own box. Why constrain yourself by thinking out of the box? Create your own box, put people in it, let them think out of it. What stops you from doing that, right? And we convert our moat into creating your own boxes, right? And that's an environment, that we offer here. Now, how do you translate all of this into an employer branding, right? That's, what we focus on. So we focus on our branding messaging in terms of the domains that we offer. Like I said, we work on almost every domain, health, fintech, you name it, right? So this is one company where you will get to work on various domains under one roof, right? That's one messaging. The second messaging that we have is we focus heavily on the rotation of the people within the company, right? So we've got a robust IJP, program where we are trying to create a T-shaped organization where people have the opportunity to move from one area to another. So if you're working in one product, you can move into another product. If you're working in one role, you can move into other role. And I'm happy to tell you that our IJP is 93%. It's extremely high. The amount of promotions that we have done for people from, so we've got something called horizontal, vertical, and diagonal IJP strategy. So people can move horizontally within the company. So if you are a QA guy, you go into development. You can go into development, right? Which is horizontal. So from development, you can go into engineering. From engineering, you can go into customer success. And from customer success, you can go into PMO. So you can, get a very, experience across, various domains within the company, right? And you're compensated well for those roles. It's not that you're just. Secondly, if you're probably a team leader, you can now become a project manager, or maybe you can become a product manager. You probably can become a development manager. So there are various roles that we have created, where you can not just go, horizontally, but you can also grow vertically. And at the same time, you can grow diagonally as well. When I say diagonally is basically you are completely, say for example, you are in bid management. You are a bid manager, right? And now you have worked with customers enough. You understand the marketing, you understand the pre-sales, you understand the solutions, you understand the voice of customer, you understand the pricing, you understand the offering. What stops you from becoming a marketing guy? What stops you from becoming a sales guy? So that's the diagonal growth, right? And they are perfectly positioned because they know the organization, they know the customer, they know our pricing, they know our model, they know our, the products, they know our positioning. Instead of hiring a sales guy from outside, why don't we position these people with some training and transitioning and development path in place? They can definitely turn into some of our best people. Our message is around that. And the last part is the multi-skilling part. Because we work in various domains, we don't rely on one single skill. Typically, India is a market where it's a single skill market, right? If you're working in Java, you'll typically probably with the next 10 or 15 years, you would be only working on Java. If you're a project manager, you're probably working only on project management, right? If you're probably working on, .NET or Microsoft technologies, you're probably only working on Microsoft technologies for the next 15, 20 years. But at IDox, we actually offer you to work across technologies, multi-skilled. If you're a Java guy, you're expected to know 4 or 5 other skills. It could be a Microsoft stack. It could be an AWS stack. It could be any other stack. So we build people, across technologies, and people become actually multi-skilled. So you're ready for any product. You're ready for any stack. You're ready for any domain, right? That's what we focus on our messaging when it comes to our go-to-market for our, talent attraction and employer branding.
Your IJP has covered horizontal, vertical, diagonal. If you come up with another program, you're probably looking at curves. You've run out of straight lines, Kailash. Now, before we wrap this up, I want to see if we can get some of your personal learnings. Right, you've had a diverse career in technology. You were including a stint in the government sector early on. Today, as a GCC head in a GCC which has the government sector as one of its business areas, if you look back at your professional journey, like, what would your biggest learnings be? Rather, in other words, your piece of advice for those just about to get into tech leadership roles?
It's a good question. We have all, or if not all, most of us have, gone through this journey, where we were probably coders in the beginning, or maybe we were working on the shop floor, or maybe we were a sales guy or marketing guy, or doing some domain, and we reached a stage where we are today, in this role. I think there are a couple of learnings, that I from my personal experience, one thing I realized is that, in this role, one has to become a force multiplier, right? We have to evolve from a doer mindset to becoming a more, force multiplier mindset, because we all came from this background where we were individual contributors, right? Or we were managing, small teams where the focus was clear. The scope was clear, the timeline was clear. We knew what were the outputs that we had to give. But now the focus is more on the outcomes rather than outputs. And to become, outcomes driven person, you have to cut your responsibilities across various parts of the organization. So therefore, you have to become a force multiplier. You don't have to be a hero in every single place, because when we were individual contributors, we were probably the heroes, right? We would probably call the rock stars, as they would call in the, the HR parlance, who are your rock stars? I think we have to get away from the rock star mindset. We are not the rock stars anymore. We are the people who probably do not know anything or most of the things. So our job is to find out who are the people who know this and who can do this, and get them on board. Put a plan together and they get the job done. That's what I mean by force multipliers. And the second thing, I think is we have to become like an architect, right? Who's probably had the experience of, doing many things in the past, developing systems from ground up. But now you are the people who's actually an architect, who's actually developing the roadmap, who's looking at, the organization, more from a systems perspective, a process perspective, a people perspective, a culture perspective, right? And then lay the groundwork for the organization where you can produce those rock stars. You can produce those heroes. You can churn those outs day in day. That's what you have to become an architect who produces these heroes and rock stars, and not become one. The third one is identify talent, which has potential, and grow them, right? I have seen in my career, to be honest, is I've seen leaders who prefer people coming from only certain colleges, certain universities, or certain cities, right? I advise them, be open, look at talent as potential coming from anywhere, right? At IDox, we have done that. If you look at 80% of the people at IDox, they come from smaller towns, smaller places like Sangli, Satara, Kolhapur, Wardha, right? Tumkur, Warangal. They don't come from big cities. They don't come from fancy IITs and IIMs, Some do. Some people do, but not all. Right? But that doesn't mean, these are not the people, who are not brightest. They probably studied in the best of the best schools and colleges in those smaller towns, which were convent schools, which were probably the highly revered schools and colleges. It's just that they didn't get an opportunity to get into a better college in a better city due to many constraints. Maybe people have money constraints. Many people don't want their children to travel to other cities, right? They have many constraints. Spot that talent, give them opportunity, and develop them. Trust me, they will stay back and they will really enjoy that opportunity. And fourth one is build credibility across the stakeholders, and not just the immediate peers, but also their second level, their third level, their fourth level as well. Many times when we get into leadership, we assume that, okay, now I'll talk to the CTO, CFO, CEO, or CIO of the world, right? And we'll do strategic planning and then leave it for the teams to basically figure out how to execute it. No, you engage with the CFO, but you engage with the next level of the CEO. You work with the finance controllers. You work with the cash managers. You work with the management accountants. You work with the financial accountants. You work with everybody. Build that rapport. Understand their problems and provide solutions to them using your team. And that's how you build credibility. So don't just work with only your peer group. Work with extended, stakeholders. And lastly, what I say is leadership is a lonely journey in a way, right? You have to pat on your back every morning and get up and do your job. There are no rewards. There are no certificates, right? There are no, awards. You're doing your job. In fact, you are expected to reward others, give certificates to others, identify others. So therefore, it can become a very lonely journey. So it's important to find mentors. It's important to find people who you can talk to when you have challenges, right? Find those people, right people around you. Become friends with them, right? Talk to them whenever you need. Engage with your peer network, right? Some of these GCC events that happen, you must participate. I've seen GCC leaders, they say, oh, no, I don't go to those events because I feel, A, B, C, and D. No, look, take them as an opportunity to meet other peers. Learn from their experience. Find out, if you can find a solution for the problems that you're facing in your GCC. That's your opportunity. And that's why it's very important. And get a coach if needed. And there are so many, personal coaches, that you can get out in the market, leadership coaches, right? Go get them. Make that investment in yourself. Don't wait for the company to do something about it. Invest in yourself. Find a coach. Put 10% of your salary on your own personal development. Don't put that as part of your budget for the company to do something. Put 10% of your salary aside and say, this is the money that I'm going to invest on myself in anything that I want to do and develop myself. That's what I practically recommend, how to develop yourself as a leader.
Kailash, we really have to get you for another interview, another discussion with leadership as the focus. Very informative, a lot of perspectives for not only aspiring leaders, but pretty much anybody in the corporate space to chew on. You said be open to talent from anywhere. That is, I think, the purest form of DNI, DEI in that we can do in corporate. This whole discussion has been very informative, from AI to how GCCs work to what IDox does, and of course the very last question on leadership. Thank you for letting us pick your brains on this, and I hope to catch you.
Just want to add one more thing.
All yours.
Diversity. Yeah, diversity. I want to bring one more thing. We actually ran recruitment campaigns only to attract, returning mothers and women who took sabbatical because of various reasons. Maybe a lady is taking care of her parents. Maybe, it was taking care of its ailing, somebody ailing in the family. Maybe, they had taken a maternity break. Various reasons, why sometimes, women have to take breaks in their life because they have to prioritize life over career. We actually ran specific campaigns to attract them, because some of these women they had accomplished careers before they took the sabbatical. They were project managers, they were product managers, they were amazing, developers, very, very accomplished career. And just because they had taken break, they were knocking every single door and nobody's giving the opportunities. And we actually ran campaigns, specific recruitment campaigns, only to attract them. Why? Is because a simple philosophy. Talent can come from anywhere. Don't restrict yourself, from A, B, C or D. Get them from anywhere they get.
No, absolutely. I completely understand. In fact, at one of my previous employers, I was part of branding such a return to work campaign from an employer brand and recruitment branding perspective. That was a great experience for me. I completely hear what you're saying, and much needed. So Kailash, with this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Once again, very informative. Thank you for your time, and I do hope to catch you for another discussion sometime soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity, and I loved it too. Some of the aspects, some of the questions were really good, especially on the leadership side and the domain side and the talent side. I think it has really enhanced my understanding and learning as well. From some of these questions. So thank you very much. For the opportunity. Hopefully the audience will also like.
I'm sure. So thank you, Kailash. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you so much. Thanks for your team as well.